They waved goodbye at O'Hare like they were sending off a suitcase, not a father. 5 minutes later, my name vanished from the group chat, but my name stayed on the deed. Evan pointed toward security, said he'd grab coffees while I found gate B12, and Marissa squeezed my arm like you do a dog you're about to leave at the kennel. I watched their heads disappear into the tide of rolling bags and baseball caps, and I told myself they'd be right back. They weren't. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I refreshed the chat until the bubbles went grey and my profile floated to the top like something dead in the river. The boarding pass in my pocket, MDW to Bios, July 2nd, felt like a joke I didn't get. I bought a pretzel I didn't eat, circled the terminal twice, and finally took a lift home. The receipt hit my phone, $148.62, and I underlined the amount in pencil when I got back. Because money keeps its own diary, dusk sat heavy on my block in Jefferson Park, Chicago summer, humming from the maples. A moving truck idled at my curb like a patient wolf. Primary residence, new owners today, Marissa told the foreman, all clipboard and certainty. She wore yoga black and an expression I recognized from open houses, smiling at the walls like they'd already agreed to sell themselves. Evan didn't meet my eyes. Dad, we just need the keys for the contractor. Flooring estimates Friday, fast turn, higher value. Value for whom? I said, standing on the porch where my wife and I once measured our son's height in pencil against the jamb. The nail for our wedding photo still stuck out like a small iron thorn. My hand went to the envelope in my shirt pocket, the one with my wife's scrawl from years ago, "Don't let them rush you." Inside, the air had been tidied into a stranger's house. The property tax bill lay face up on the kitchen table, $9,802, due September 1st, weighted by a coffee mug that wasn't mine. A post-it clung to the bill like a yellow leaf. "We'll cover this once it's official, XO. I peeled it off and stuck it to the refrigerator door beside a magnet from a diner off I-55. "Official," I said out loud, testing the word like a wire. Evan followed me in, jingling a new smart lock like a charm. "You signed the quitclaim," he said, softer now. "It's done." He didn't see the part I'd circled in blue ink when I first read it with my reading glasses tipped to the end of my nose. Grantor retains a life estate. He'd skimmed, or he wanted to pretend he had. That was the thing about my son. Speed was his religion. He believed in fast closings and fast captions and faster apologies. On the way out, Marissa set a file box on my porch step and marked it with a Sharpie. Marissa's desk. My porch light cut a bright circle around it, like a spotlight on a prop. "We'll swing back tomorrow," she said. "Contractor at 10. Have the keys ready." She started down the steps and then, sweet as syrup, turned back. "This is going to be so good for you." "This house is my retirement," I said. "It doesn't need to be good for me. It is me." They left with the truck's diesel grumble fading to a soft, dirty purr. In the quiet, the deadbolt I'd paid for turned under my thumb and sang the old click. I made coffee in the chipped blue kettle and laid my day out on the table. Boarding pass, lift receipt, the tax bill, the envelope with my wife's handwriting. Betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it lays a post-it on your life and calls it love. I took a pen, circled the due date, and wrote one word in the margin that felt like both a prayer and a dare. Read July 3rd, felt like the morning after a storm that never actually rained. Everything heavy, nothing washed clean. I woke up at 5 to the sound of the compressor on the old Kenmore cycling on and off like it was thinking about quitting. I stood in the kitchen with the tax bill flat under my palm, $9,802 due September 1st, and the post-it stuck to the fridge like a yellow bruise. I brewed coffee in the chipped blue kettle and tried to swallow the metal taste sitting under my tongue. My wife used to say grief is just love with nowhere to land. Betrayal is worse. It lands in your house and makes itself coffee. I walked the rooms the way linemen walk a line after an outage, eyes on everything small enough to have caused the trouble. The dent in the basement banister at waist height. From the Christmas tree stand we wrestled down there in '03. The scuff behind the piano where my boot heeled. Grazed the wall, moving it for carpet cleaning in 2016. We never painted over it because it gives the house history. My fingertips found the tiny rip in the screen door my grandson made with a toy truck last spring. History, all right. I could feel my heart do that wrong drumbeat again. Skip, run, skip. I set my wallet on the counter next to a manila folder they'd left as if they were my office managers. Quitclaim deed at the top. I didn't need to read it again, but I did, because reading is a flashlight. There it was in blue ring around the words I'd already circled. Grantor retains a life estate. The circle steadied me like a handrail. I hadn't surrendered possession. I hadn't given away the right to say who stepped over this threshold or when. I had signed something else entirely, and they either hadn't read it or they'd decided I wouldn't. My phone lit up with the kind of cruelty people think is harmless. Evan's Instagram story. A photo of my porch, our porch, with a big white caption, "Finally securing the family home. Does estate planning." 32 little hearts tapped by people who wouldn't know a sump pump if it tapped back. I screenshotted it and emailed it to myself with the subject line evidence, Porch Post 7-3, not because I'm a tech wizard, because I know paper, and an email is just paper that hides in a wire. The panic I'd been keeping in my chest tried to sprint. Banks, sheriff, title, words in all caps. I forced my eyes onto ordinary things. The sticky lemon sugar ring on the counter where my grandson spilled lemonade. The grocery receipt shoved under the salt shaker, 2811 at Jewel Osco. Bread, pears, coffee filters. I slipped that receipt into the drawer and underlined the date. When everything else is noise, you keep the ledger. The magnet on the refrigerator with Carp and Daughters, elder law, was crooked. I straightened it and dialed. The voicemail caught me mid-breath. "Mr. Carp, my name is Turner," I said, hearing how small my voice sounded in that empty kitchen. "My son and daughter-in-law had me sign a deed. I retained a life estate. They've brought a contractor. They left me at O'Hare yesterday. I need to know what this paper actually does." I looked at the clock over the stove. 10:41 a.m. I said the time out loud so my mouth would remember it later. I hung up and wrote, "Left message for Carp, 10:41 a.m. on a sticky note and pressed it to the inside of the cabinet door where we used to hide candy from the kids. I ate a pear at the sink, juice running down my wrist, staring at the back fence where a robin bullied a grackle off the top rail like a bouncer. The house smelled faintly of Murphy oil soap, that clean fake smell realtors love. I opened windows. The July heat came in like a dog you forgot was big. Somewhere down the block a mower droned. I used to love that sound. Today it felt like someone humming while they stole the silver. A knock drifted through the screen. Dina from across the street held a pie plate like a peace offering. "Are you okay, Mr. T?" Her eyes did that quick scan women do when they think danger might be hiding in the hallway. She looked past me at the staged emptiness, the missing photo from the foyer nail. "They moved things. They moved the word family," I said, and I hated how dramatic it sounded, but there it was. I stepped back and let her in. She set the pie, cherry, still warm, right on top of the tax bill without meaning to, then noticed and moved it to a placemat. "Sorry," she said, and then softer, "No, I'm not. It looked good there." I told her the airport story the quick way, the only way I could without cracking, the wave at security, the coffees, the ghosting, the long ride home. I showed her the deed and the blue circle around those 4 stubborn words. She breathed out. "Good," she said, and it was the first time that word felt possible. "I notarized your signature on that. For you. In my journal I wrote the note, Grantor retained life estate, because people forget what words mean when their cheeks get hot." "You wrote it in the margin?" I asked, like a man reaching for a railing on a dark staircase. "Margin and notes section," she said, tapping her temple. "And here. I'm not choosing sides, Mr. T. I'm choosing the law." I made more coffee. We each took a mug and sat at the table with the ledger of my life laid out. Boarding pass. Lift receipt, porch photo, deed. She touched the tax bill with one finger. "This date matters," she said. "September 1st, money is proof." "Money keeps its own diary," I said, and we both smiled like we'd found a piece of our language again. When she left, I walked the perimeter of the house like a night guard. I tested windows, checked the back door. The smart lock Evan had palmed last night sat unopened on the counter in its cardboard coffin. I wrote on an index card and leaned it against the box. No new locks without counsel. I put the card in my pocket because men who work with their hands know pockets save lives. At 4, the phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Marissa's voice poured out, sweet and busy. We need the keys for contractors. Flooring estimates Friday morning. This will be so easy if you just trust us. I saved the message, then listened to it again with the volume low, like it might bite. I wrote the words, "We need the keys," in my notebook and underlined them twice. Needing and owning are not the same. At 5, the sun burned a stripe across the dining room table where our papers lay. I put the boarding pass on top so the light hit the date. Then I did something small and necessary. I washed the dishes, wiped the counters, took out the trash. When I came back in, the house felt like it was still mine, because I was doing the small things that keep a place alive. On the way to bed, I stopped in the hallway and looked at the empty nail where the wedding photo had hung. I pressed my thumb to the wall under it and said to the quiet, "Don't let them rush you." The wall didn't answer, but it held. I slept like someone listening for a footstep. In the morning, I would wait for Carp's call, and I would make them read. July 6th came like a reprieve, Carp's number glowing on my flip phone at 8:12 a.m. His voice was slow and steady, the kind of cadence you hear from a man who's handled too many panicked children of old parents. "Mr. Turner," he said, "tell me exactly what you signed." I pulled the deed from the manila folder, laid it flat on the table, and read it out loud, my fingers sliding word to word like I was back in 3rd grade. When I got to Granta retains a life estate, Carp stopped me. "That's the spine," he said. "They can posture all they want, but possession stays with you. They can't sell, they can't rent, they can't even swap out a lock without your consent. It's like you signed a seatbelt into the deed." I told him Dina had notarized it, my neighbor from across the street, the one who still brings soup on snow days. "She keeps a meticulous journal," I said. Carp chuckled. "Good, we'll need that. Those books save lives in court." Then his tone sharpened. "Do not escalate. Do not change locks without my nod. Document everything, preserve evidence, let them think they've won until the paper shows otherwise. They can't record a deed that contradicts its own terms. A title officer will stop them cold." After the call, I poured coffee into a thermos and carried 2 mugs across the street. Dina met me in her driveway, her leather notary journal under her arm. She flipped to July 1st and tapped the line. My name, her seal, my thumbprint, and in the margin, in her small, neat cursive, "Granta retained life estate." "I wrote it twice," she said, "in case someone tries to forget what words mean." That night, Marissa's voice filled my voicemail like she was reading a script. "We need the keys for contractors. Flooring estimate is Friday. Trust us, this will be quick." Her tone was sweet as cough syrup, but it made my skin itch. I saved the message, pressed 2 to replay, and wrote her words in my notebook. On July 7th, the insurance renewal hit my checking account. Premium withdrawn under my name. I circled it on the bank statement and slid it into the quiet title folder I'd started. Each page was a brick, and I was building a wall. By July 8th, I was calm enough to notice small things again. The smell of cut grass drifting through the kitchen window. The sound of a ball game crackling from a neighbor's porch radio. But underneath all of it was a different hum. Revenge, I realized, doesn't begin with anger. It begins with reading the fine print, and I was ready to make them read. July 9th, I labeled a fresh folder in block letters, "Quiet Title." The act felt ceremonial, like laying a cornerstone. I tucked inside the first document, Carp's draft of a notice of possessory rights. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even dramatic. Just calm sentences that said everything. I retained a life estate. I held exclusive possession. Any entry without my consent was trespass. That letter was me standing in my own hallway with the lights on. Dina came over that afternoon. She watched me sign, then watched me seal the certified envelopes, one to Evan, one to Marissa. She logged it all in her notary journal, her pen scratching like a sewing machine. "Paper beats performance," she said, sliding the book shut. We walked to the mailbox together and let the envelopes drop into the blue metal mouth. I felt the thunk in my chest like a drumbeat. On July 11th, I mowed the lawn, the push mower rattling over roots the same way it had for 20 years. July 12th, I paid the $145 Choe dues online. July 13th, I turned down a roof estimate I didn't ask for. Every small act was a flare saying, "I still live here." Meanwhile, the folder thickened. The appraisal I ordered for August 2nd, confirmation email printed and paid. $289 on my card ending 8421. The title company's intake sheet I requested on July 14th. Their chirpy reply, "We'll loop you in at recording," was the crack in their smile. That "loop you in" meant they were trying to slip the paperwork through without me at the table. I stapled the email to the intake sheet and wrote in the margin, "Evidence." That same day, I pulled out my bank statement and highlighted July 2nd, lift ride, $148.62, airport parking timestamp, 2:47 p.m., boarding pass. All breadcrumbs leading to the moment they left me stranded while a moving truck prowled my street. Betrayal had a date and a dollar sign, and so would revenge. I sat at the dining room table under the yellow glow of the pendant lamp, my wife's note folded beneath the pile. "Don't let them rush you." I tapped the pen against the table and whispered it back. This wasn't rushing. This was reading. By the time the July heat broke into a thunderstorm that night, the folders on my table were lined up like soldiers. Airport, deed, notice, title, insurance. Each one was a weapon, lawful and sharp. Revenge wasn't fire. Revenge was paperwork. Quiet, precise, and permanent, and I was just getting started. July 18th started with the sound of tires on gravel. I looked through the front window and saw Evan striding up the walk, Marissa a half step behind him, and a contractor in steel-toed boots carrying a clipboard. Evan twirled something in his hand, shiny, metallic, a new smart lock. He was grinning like he'd brought me a birthday present. "Dad, this will raise the value," he said, holding the lock up so it caught the morning light. I stayed in the foyer, under the empty nail, where our wedding photo once hung. Value for whom? My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Marissa flipped a page on her clipboard, pen tapping. "You signed, remember? We're investing now. Flooring's first." She gestured toward the contractor. He looked like a man who wanted to be anywhere else. I didn't argue. I reached into my folder, pulled out the notice of possessory rights they'd both signed for on July 11th, and set it on the hall table between us. Then I hit speakerphone and dialed Carp's office. His paralegal answered, her voice steady, professional. "Life estate means no locks, no contractors, no possession without permission," she recited, like she'd said it 100 times. The contractor shifted his weight, cleared his throat. "I'm not getting in the middle of family," he muttered, and he walked right back out the door. But my son didn't. His face reddened. "You're being unreasonable." I tilted my head toward the doorbell camera, the little red LED pulsing like a heart. "The camera's unreasonable too," I said. Silence. Marissa tugged his sleeve, but he didn't move. Not right away. That night I saw the fallout. Evan posted a picture of my porch on Instagram with the caption, "We finally own it." A boast, a stake in the ground. 10 minutes later, he deleted it. But Dina had already screenshot it and texted it to me. "Don't worry. Got it saved." Proof doesn't vanish when you delete. I made coffee at midnight, the bitter smell filling the house, and cleaned the machine while it brewed. I wrote on a 3x5 card in block letters, "Don't argue, document." I slid it into my pocket behind my wallet. On July 22nd, the voicemail came from the title company. "We just need the grantor ID to complete recording." That was their tell. They wanted me to hand over the last piece that would let them pretend the life estate didn't exist. I called back with the calmest words I'd said all month. "Counsel will reply." I hung up, put the phone down, and looked around my kitchen. Same blue kettle on the stove. Same dent in the banister. Same tax bill circled on the calendar date. But the tempo had changed. They thought they were pushing me out. They didn't know Act 7 already had a courtroom reserved, and I was making sure they'd have front row seats. August 1st brought the kind of twist you don't see in movies. Too quiet, too bureaucratic, too damning to be anything but real. An email slid into my inbox from the title company assistant. Attached, a revised deed, one that neatly removed the line about my retained life estate. At the bottom, per client preference, as if property law was a Starbucks order. I printed it out on my old Canon and walked it down to Karp's office. His eyebrows rose, slow as a curtain. "They've overplayed," he said, tapping the paper. "They just tried to erase you with an email." He dictated a filing on the spot, temporary restraining order, emergency basis, and clipped the assistant's email behind it as Exhibit B, Exhibit A, would be Dinah's notary journal. Exhibit C, Evan's Instagram brag. I watched his paralegal stack the evidence into a folder that looked like it could crack a skull. Daily Center, room 1407, August 28th, 9:30 a.m., Karp said, sliding me the docket slip like a summons to my own resurrection. On August 3rd, I rekeyed only the back door, invoice 189, under Karp's instruction. One lock. Leave the front unchanged. Don't give them a claim of retaliation. The locksmith slid the fresh cylinder into place, and I pocketed the receipt. Evidence. That night, I taped a copy of the TRO notice to the inside of the storm door, invisible from the street, but waiting for any hand that dared tug the handle. On August 6th, Marissa's voicemail poured honey into poison. "We have buyers interested if we can list fast. Don't drag this out." I saved it, added it to the social folder. By August 10th, my dining room table was a war council. Folders lined in order: airport, deed, notice, title, social insurance. Each stacked with paper, each ready to be unlatched in court. On top, under the lamp's circle of light, I placed my wife's note. "Don't let them rush you." I sat in the hush, flipping each folder open, closing it again. Exhibits weren't just proof, they were props, each with its own line to deliver. And in the Daily Center, the stage lights were waiting. If revenge was a play, I had built the set. And in 3 weeks, the curtain would rise. August 28th, the Daily Center rose out of downtown like a slab of judgment. I got there early, the city still damp from last night's rain. Dina met me on the steps, her notary journal tucked under her arm like scripture. "I wrote everything," she said. "Every line." I nodded, grateful, but I couldn't speak just yet. Inside room 1407, the air smelled of peppermint gum and old paper. I sat behind Karp at the petitioner's table. Evan and Marissa slid in across the aisle, whispering like kids cheating on a quiz. Evan wore a suit that didn't fit. Marissa's realtor badge glinted from her purse strap. My folder stack rested at my feet like loaded cartridges. The judge entered, robes swaying, glasses low. "'Cause number 2025 CH 1429, the clerk called." Karp rose. His voice was steady, not loud. He began with Exhibit A, Dina's journal page. Her neat cursive filled the projection screen. "Grantor retains life estate." The judge's eyes flicked to Evan, who looked suddenly smaller. Exhibit B, the email from the title assistant. Karp read aloud, per client preference. The judge's eyebrow climbed like a pulley hauling up a weight. Exhibit C, Evan's Instagram post. "We finally own it," with the timestamp. Dana's screenshot proof. Then came the timeline. Karp wove it like thread. July 2nd boarding pass, the lift receipt for $148.62. The moving truck idling at my curb the same night. "Abandonment at O'Hare," he said. "A coercive environment created to force a signature, yet the document itself contradicts their claim." Marissa stood, voice sharp as broken glass. "We were just helping." He signed. He wanted this. She waved her clipboard like it could substitute for law. Evan followed, muttering, "It's our house. He signed. He signed." His voice cracked on the repetition. The judge leaned forward. "He signed a deed retaining a life estate, which means possession stays with him. You cannot change locks. You cannot list. You cannot encumber. Any further attempt will be met with sanctions." Understood? The silence after sanctions was thicker than any shouting. The gavel came down. TRO granted. No recording inconsistent with the original deed. Quiet title hearing set. Costs reserved. As we filed out, sunlight hit the plaza in bright slashes. Marissa caught my arm at the bottom of the stairs. "We can fix this," she whispered. "Family." I looked her in the eye and said gently, "Family also reads." Dina hugged me tight, whispering, "Told you paper wins." Carp pocketed his glasses and murmured, "Now we finish the paperwork." And in the mirrored glass of the loop, I saw a man who still lived in his own house. September 1st, Labor Day weekend. The streets of Jefferson Park were hung with flags and the smell of charcoal, but my business wasn't barbecue. It was survival. I wrote a check for $9,802 to the Cook County Treasurer, slid it into the blue steel drop box outside the branch office, and stood there until the envelope disappeared with a hollow clunk. Bills are declarations. That one declared, "This house is still mine." Back home, I spread Carp's latest draft across the table. Quiet title order. A paragraph that read like scripture. Title vested in grantor for life, remainder deferred. No party may list, encumber, or represent otherwise. On September 9th, the judge signed it. The black ink seal was ordinary to anyone else, but to me it was oxygen. That night, I finally changed the smart lock code. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but release. I emailed the order to my insurer, to the HOA, and to the title company. The replies came in fast, bland, beautiful, updated, file noted, understood. One word I liked best, updated. My name updated, not erased. A week later, the ripple reached Marissa. Her broker opened a compliance inquiry, quiet, surgical. Realtors don't like deeds scrubbed per client preference. She didn't lose her license, not yet. But a letter like that stains. Evan, meanwhile, sent a text. "We can start over." I typed a dozen replies, deleted them all. Finally wrote, "Start with the truth. Justice wasn't cinematic. No parade, no spotlight. It was coffee at my own table, the hum of my refrigerator, the scuff behind the piano nobody else noticed. It was pulling a CD from the bank, cashing it in, and mailing Carp his final balance, $1,130. I even enclosed a handwritten thank you note, the way my father taught me. The appraisal pegged the house at $384,000, but the value wasn't numbers anymore. It was the simple fact that I could walk barefoot down my hallway at night, touch the wall where our wedding photo once hung, and know I hadn't been deleted. Revenge, when done right, doesn't explode. It settles, it roots, it endures. September 12th. The air had turned sharp, the kind of Chicago September morning that reminds you summer's just a guest. I sat on the back steps with a mug of coffee cooling between my palms, watching maple leaves go from green to yellow, like someone flipped a switch. The court order sat in a fresh red folder beside me, labeled in thick pen, "Boundaries." I thought about the old days on the line, me in a hard hat, leather gloves, climbing into storms. We had a saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You don't rush current. If you do, it cooks you. My wife used to say the same thing about family decisions. "Don't let urgency drive the car," she'd whisper. Evan never learned that. He ran hot, like every problem could be outpaced. This time, he tried to outrun me with paperwork. The airport trick was cruel. The deed trick was greed. But the worst part? They expected me not to read. That was the wound. They thought my eyes had dimmed, that I'd shuffle paper like a man too tired to notice. I drafted a letter I didn't send. "Evan, if you'd asked to share equity, to learn how taxes work, I'd have said yes. But you tried to climb a ladder I paid for while I stood on the ground. That isn't building, that's stealing." I folded the letter and slid it into the boundaries folder, unsent but not forgotten. That afternoon, Dina knocked with a thermos of tomato soup and her journal tucked under her arm. She opened it to the date of the hearing, August 28th, and tapped the line she'd written. "Judgment entered. Possession retained. So when it gets muddy, you remember," she said. I smiled, the steam of the soup rising between us. Paper heavier than stone. Justice quieter than thunder. I carried the folder back inside, set it on the shelf above my desk, and let its weight settle. This wasn't just about a house. It was about reading every line and teaching myself, that when you expect me to be blind, I will show up with my eyes wide open. The first week of fall came with small envelopes and small victories. On September 20th, the HOA emailed their seasonal notice, fall cleanup required. $145 due. I paid it online without a blink, smiling at the absurdity. That fee, once a burden, now felt like a declaration. I am still the one paying, therefore I am still the one living here. 2 days later, the title company's manager phoned me herself. "Mr. Turner, I want to apologize for my assistant's lapse." Her voice carried the weight of someone trying to scrub a stain with polite words. I told her I liked the fern in her lobby because truth doesn't need venom, just memory. We spoke of grandchildren we didn't have, mortgages we did, and she promised the file had been corrected permanently. News traveled faster than leaves turning. Dinah told me on her porch swing that Marissa's broker had closed the compliance inquiry with a caution letter. Not a revocation, not yet, but a paper mirror she'd have to look at every time she touched a client's file. Evan, meanwhile, had started therapy. Word drifts in a neighborhood the way smoke does, quietly, inevitably. On September 25th, I opened my mailbox and found a cashier's check for $1,000. The memo line read, "For taxes." My son's handwriting. My hand didn't shake as I endorsed it back and slipped in a photocopy of the life estate clause. On the memo line of my return, I wrote, "For reading." I mailed it at the corner box, first class. Not a win, not a loss. A lesson sent with a stamp. That evening, I cleaned the gutters. On the roof, between damp leaves, I found a chipped blue marble wedged behind a downspout, the one my grandson had lost in 2002. I turned it over in my palm, light catching its scar. Proof that not everything gets erased. Some things stay hidden, waiting to be found again. I put the marble in my pocket and went inside. The house smelled like dust and soup. My house, my air, my ledger of quiet victories. Justice hadn't just been served in court. It was still being served. Every ordinary day, I got to live here on my own terms. September 15th, the mail slot clattered and a glossy postcard slid onto the rug. Big bold print, "Open house, charming bungalow, great bones." My address, an algorithmic joke, or maybe the universe's sense of humor. I pinned it to the refrigerator with a magnet from a truck stop diner off I-55. Irony belongs in plain sight. Later that week in the Jewel-Osco line, I stood behind a young couple arguing softly about a fixer-upper. "We'll paint, we'll sand the floors, it'll be ours," the woman said, her eyes shining with math. I didn't interrupt. I just wished them a good inspector, honest neighbors, and a roof that wouldn't betray them. Back home, the house held its quiet. I sat at the old piano bench, the one with the crack in the leg, and let my fingers find 6 broken notes of my wife's favorite hymn. The sound floated into the living room, lingered against the walls we painted together in '98, and I swear the air caught it like hands. A week later, Evan came by with 2 coffees from the corner shop. He didn't ask for keys. He didn't bring a contractor. He sat across from me and said, almost shy, "I need Dina's number. Marissa and I have to sign a car title, together." He smiled without teeth, but it was something. We weren't healed. We weren't close. But for the first time in months, he was asking to read before signing. That mattered. When he left, I pulled out the court order and wrote a single line in ink across the back. "You didn't lose me. You gambled me. And I chose to be the house." I slid the paper into the boundaries folder, shut it, and set it back on the shelf. Revenge wasn't fire or fury. It was survival, and it was mine. September 15. The mail slot clattered and a glossy postcard slid onto the rug. Big bold print, "Open house, charming bungalow, great bones." My address, an algorithmic joke, or maybe the universe's sense of humor. I pinned it to the refrigerator with a magnet from a truck stop diner off I-55. Irony belongs in plain sight. Later that week in the Jewel-Osco line, I stood behind a young couple arguing softly about a fixer-upper. "We'll paint, we'll sand the floors, it'll be ours," the woman said, her eyes shining with math. I didn't interrupt. I just wished them a good inspector, honest neighbors, and a roof that wouldn't betray them. Back home, the house held its quiet. I sat at the old piano bench, the one with the crack in the leg, and let my fingers find 6 broken notes of my wife's favorite hymn. The sound floated into the living room, lingered against the walls we painted together in '98, and I swear the air caught it like hands. A week later, Evan came by with 2 coffees from the corner shop. He didn't ask for keys. He didn't bring a contractor. He sat across from me and said, almost shy, "I need Dina's number. Marissa and I have to sign a car title, together." He smiled without teeth, but it was something. We weren't healed. We weren't close. But for the first time in months, he was asking to read before signing. That mattered. When he left, I pulled out the court order and wrote a single line in ink across the back. "You didn't lose me. You gambled me." And I chose to be the house. I slid the paper into the boundaries folder, shut it, and set it back on the shelf. Revenge wasn't fire or fury. It was survival, and it was mine.